an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Holy Sister, Prologue, and chapters 1 through 5. In these chapters, we get to see some of the escape from the troops that are chasing at the very end of the last book, and then we jump ahead a whole bunch of time and go back and forth. I don't know how I feel about it. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Martin for commissioning this episode. Hi, Martin, if you're here. This is kind of an odd start to this book because I fully expected that we would begin from where the epilogue of the last book left off, which was, there was the fires raging, and let's see, Thorin Toxis, as it turns out, is not dead. I thought that he was, which delighted me, and that Lano was the only one remaining. It turns out that Lano has gotten his inheritance because Thoron has basically been put out of commission. He is, the harm being glued to his skin has made him essentially, like, his brain broke. And they don't know why exactly Lano hasn't killed his father or had somebody kill him, because it's really funny how everybody's like, isn't it super weird that he hasn't killed his dad yet? Like, it's such a given that he would do that because he's such a shitty dude that nobody really understands why that hasn't happened yet. And I am also curious about that. I feel like there has to be some specific reason for it. And, because why he has, like, I'm wondering if there's something that's like that he's gonna do that he feels like, well, I'm not technically like gonna be held responsible for it as long as my father is really the one in charge. So if I do this shitty thing as the ruler of the family, he'll take the punishment. I don't know, but anyway, I'm getting sidetracked because he is the one that is like coming at the Abbey at the end of the last book. And, I just expected that this book would begin with that attack. And instead, when the book begins, we actually have jumped back from the proper ending of the last book and not the epilogue, which I was really surprised by. And I'm not like disappointed exactly, because there was no real reason why jumping ahead was something I was like super interested in. I would like to see how they escape and how all of that works out, actually. But it's an odd thing to go into something and not even realize that you have an expectation until that's not what you get. Martin is here. Sorry I'm late. Forgot about clocks changing. Did they already? Wait, did they? Did we fall back? Wow. I didn't even notice. I am not on things, guys. Okay, well, anyway. So, let's go to the prologue. It starts off with a second person present, which I don't feel like has ever been done in this series. The roar of a crowd invades you like a living thing, reverberating in your chest, taking its answer from your lips without permission. The press of bodies overwhelms the barriers, and unknowingly, the many become something singular, the same emotion bleeding from the skins of different people, the same thought reverberating in 100 skulls or 1,000. For a martial empath, it can be a thing at once both terrifying and glorious, expanding their control, making it easier to reach into the minds around them, but also allowing the possibility that in such a storm of humanity, they may lose themselves, may be lifted out of their flesh, never to find it again. Wow. I didn't know that was a possibility. That sucks. I'm kind of interested to see like what that looks like and hear if that has actually happened to anybody, because I have to imagine the only reason we know that can happen is because it has indeed happened to somebody. And I wonder if that's something that you can utilize as a bit of a weapon against somebody with this sort of talent. And it abruptly switches from the first person present to Marcus and his point of view. So Marcus is the boy who was with the pony or the donkey, I don't remember which it was, that gets killed by the high priest, who unfortunately is not only still alive, but is now in charge of his school. And I just can't emphasize enough how much I want this man dead. Like, just, there's no other way to say it. I was talking to a friend about really hoping that a certain person in a high position in the United States would die. And they said that that made me a bad person. And really, I don't believe that. I truly do not. But even if it were true, then fine. I guess I'm a bad person, and that's fine. There are some people that just suck and make the world worse, make other people suffer, and don't care enough about another human being to do the bare minimum to help or keep them alive, even though they have all the power and privilege in the world. And those people, I think, are better off erased from the surface of the planet. And that man is certainly one of them. And I think that I was somewhat satisfied with his removal. Not that I really, preferred that to his death, but because I felt like that was a good punishment for somebody like that man. Removing him from power felt like something he would feel keenly. But realizing that now he, because of his connections, is in another position of power. It's different, and it might not be as influential, but that really bummed me out. I wasn't expecting to hear about this guy again so soon, or at all, necessarily. So Marcus is watching Denham fighting. And this dude is a just massive beast of a human being. And he is going up against this dude who, there's a moment, somebody says Five says he doesn't last a round against Denham. And it's one of those interesting things where a lot of times in a situation like this, an author will set up that we're going to see somebody who is an unlikely contender show up. Everybody's like, oh, they'll never make it. They'll never last. And then that person whoops their ass. And we do wind up getting that. But initially, I thought that this first person was going to be that one. And that is mostly because I didn't think that, call me crazy, that Nona would be allowed to go out and fight in this ring. And evidently she is having to sneak away. But it didn't occur to me that Nona was going to be the one. So since we're starting off with this new guy, I kind of expected that maybe this man would show himself to be more of a threat than everyone thought. It says the man was a refugee from the port of Rennes, which now lay within the Dernish incursion. He had some reputation from pit fights in the frost towns along the north margins. So I kind of wondered, is the point of this scene going to be that we see the fighting style of some people who are outside of the territory that we're used to seeing, and maybe people begin to realize that these people have some tricks up their sleeve or have a different way of fighting that's actually sort of weirdly advantageous, or that they're just tougher than people expected. It doesn't go in that direction at all. This guy gets literally picked up and smashed face first into the floor. And honestly, that is so brutal. And I know that's the point, but I can't handle how intense that is to just Face first. Jesus Christ. So Denham at this point is really feeling himself. He's about to like get out of the ring. And then somebody comes and challenges him, a second person, which he wasn't expecting. And Denham fixed the newcomer with a stare so murderous that Marcus felt the need to run boiling up inside him. As an empath, he was used to swimming in the currents of others' emotions, but the ring fighter's anger ran swifter and more deep than anything he'd felt before, and at each moment threatened to overwhelm his senses. Which, that's really interesting that some people's, like, emotions can be much, much stronger and more intense than others. I wonder how mine would be, because they feel extremely intense to me. But, you know, I wonder if that's any sort of indication about what the person's like. Does that indicate that they are more passionate? Does that indicate that they are more out of control? Perhaps more childish, you know, like, so this person comes up and it turns out that it is Nona, and she just takes her cloak off and she's wearing a loincloth and just like a band of cloth around her chest. And that's what she fights in, which is honestly, that sounds terrible to me. That sounds awful. And she punches at this guy repeatedly and seems to have no impact at all. Guys, have you all seen Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the film? Because what's-his-face Culkin is in that. I can't remember his first name. And he plays Scott's gay roommate. And at one point, Scott is fighting this girl, and this Culkin boy breaks off making out with a kid and sits up and yells, "Kick her in the balls!" and then goes back to making out. And I swear to God, when she starts fighting this guy, that was me. I was just yelling, like, I was very into the fight, but I definitely had a moment of, like, pulling out of it and just yelling, "Kick her in the balls." And indeed, Nona does kick Denham in the balls. It's really, let's be honest, the only weak spot on this guy, because he is like 4-inch thick slabs of muscle covering 6-inch thick pieces of bone. He has this like body that is made to take damage and not feel it or not react. And she is teeny tiny, and there's really only so much force that you can build with like the body type that she has, because I appreciate, and I think it was mentioned at the end of the last book, that like you can make your muscles stronger and you can pick things up and manage to like use certain types of magic essentially to increase your strength. But there's only so much that your body can physically handle, and there is a limit to that. And that's always been something that like I know that that's like something I shouldn't have a problem with in like superhero stuff, because there's so much that is problematic. But I always have sort of wondered about when somebody picks up an object that is simply outside of what a body that size compared to an object that size should really be able to like actually manage. I'm just like, how? That doesn't really like make any sense though. Like looking at it, it doesn't make sense. And that's the point. But I like the fact that this author is like trying to sort of acknowledge that and place limits on what you can do, so that people don't just get like, you know, hulked out and are able to do virtually anything because of the fact that they have a connection to this power, you know? So yeah, I love the fact too that Nona manages to kick him in the balls because she sort of like goads him into coming at her by saying, "Come on, big boy." And it makes him scream with rage and like fly towards her. And he sort of leaves himself totally open because the reaction he has is unguarded. You know, this man is not used to having to be defensive. He doesn't ever have to worry about that. So that's just not a priority for his fight style. And I love this moment. Nona sprang to her feet, the fight still in her face, teeth bared. With the awful gale of Denham's hatred subsumed into his wordless agony, Marcus could now feel Nona's emotions and found himself rocked back upon his heels by the raw animal aggression bleeding off her. He had experienced something similar when a wrong turn had taken him to the dog pits beyond the walls of Old Town. A bloodied mastiff with its jaws locked around the throat of another hound had given off the same explosive violence that the novice did. Marcus fully expected Nona to fall upon her prey, gouging Denham's eyes from their sockets or stamping his face to pulp. But instead, in the space of 5 deep breaths, she drew it all back in, every piece, until there was nothing he could read above the mixed sea of emotion all around him. Of all that he had seen that night, it was this quenching of fury that was the most remarkable to him. I think that's so interesting that she has this this lust for violence in her that is that overpowering, and yet she does seem to have control of it after a point. And we find out when we're in her POV that basically she feels like she used to blame this bloodthirst on Kiat. And she's realizing so much of it was not Kiat at all. And that this thing needs feeding in its way as well. That's still in her. And it's completely of her. This isn't some external thing. And I can't tell you guys how much I feel like I relate to this rage issue thing. And I've said it before, but it is something that I just find genuinely low-level worrying. It's not something that worries me every day, but there will be times where it flares up and I feel myself almost lose control of my physical body. I want to do something physically in reaction to something that happens, and I almost do it without thinking. And I have to imagine that there are plenty of people out there that struggle with this, and they don't manage to get a hold of it before it slips out of their grasp. And it's a terrible thing because when you try and tell somebody, oh, I didn't mean to, it's well, you did the thing. Clearly you meant to do the thing. If you hurt someone or if you know, but at the same time, there is a part of me that would probably mean it. I didn't mean it. Not like that, and Nona, having to feed it a little bit and then pull it back in. I really am envious of her a little bit. I would like to be able to feed it, and I can't do that. I just have to completely contain it and hope that I'd never do something that is going to get me in trouble. And I don't know, that's I'm going to say right now, I believe I will get in trouble because of it one day. I think it'll happen. And I don't know what that's going to look like. I have no idea. But I just feel like there will be a time where I don't manage it. And, this sort of the moment where he's I expected her to go after her and gouge his eyes out. I mean, I'm reading it I wish she fucking would because he's a monster. He seems like a bad dude, He's yeah, his body is made in such a way that it is an advantage in a fight, but he clearly just enjoys beating the ever-loving shit out of people. He is a bit of a sadist, And I'm just well, gouge his eyes out. Fuck him. Whatever. So anyway, we go from there chapter 1, and it says present day. And we're in Holy Class. Or it's called Holy Class, my bad. But we're still with Marcus. And we go to Nona's perspective, looking at him. And she's remembering the way in which they like got to know each other, both being in the cage, and that he's actually grown to be like a pretty good looking guy, and the softness of his love for that animal that was killed. And I think it says, mule. It was a mule. That sort of made her like warm up to him a little bit. And she tells him to come outside with her to talk. And Marcus is like, I didn't think the convent would let you fight here. And she's like, oh, they don't. I'm just here because I needed to settle an old dispute, as she said. Why did you want me? Send the message, I mean. And it says, Marcus seemed less sure of himself than she had expected. Someone who could read her like a book should be more confident. She certainly wished her own empath skills would tell her more of his mood than she could glean from the intensity of his stare or the tight line of his lips. And she says, that day at the academy, did you make that girl attack me? I wasn't expecting that. I had forgotten all about it. I mean, to be honest, yeah, I completely out of my head. And he says she was already attacking you, but she can feel the guilt rolling off him. And finally he admits that yes, he did. And Nona's like, well, she tried to shadow rend me and basically tear me apart. And Marcus is like, I didn't know that she was capable of doing something like that. I just made her angry. And he apologizes. But she asks why. And Nona says, Abbot Jacob told me to. He was appointed to St. Croix as abbot a year after Abbess Glass had Nevis replace him as high priest. So this is when we find out about the whole thing. And yeah, he's been, instructed. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it sucks that he did this, but he was under the pressure of somebody who could really probably hurt him pretty bad if he wanted to and not really suffer repercussions from that, I bet. And, kind of what are you supposed to do, especially if you aren't aware that this girl is able to do what she could do to Nona, which I would hazard the abbot did know. And that's why he told Marcus to do it. Maybe he placed this girl against Nona so that Marcus wouldn't realize the potential danger and it would make him more willing to cooperate. And then, oh, well, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was possible if he were to deny it at all, which somebody like that, I have a feeling wouldn't even bother to deny it because why? So at this point, Regal comes up and Regal is like, Nona's pleased that he saw the fight. And we find out later that she's sleeping with him. And I gotta say, I really wish that we got a little bit more of that because Regal just sounds hot. And I really want to know what's going on between them. And there's a baby little hint that maybe there's something between her and Arabella, and it's not actually crystallized yet, but it feels like there's a bit of an aura between the two of them. And I feel maybe Arabella in particular feels it more than Nona, or maybe understands what it is more quickly than Nona has, because she seems to be a bit jealous of Regal. Not jealous of Nona. It's a very different thing. And, I'm here for that. I would like it if we could have both, because why not? But I really I like Arabella. She's badass as well. So, if Nona were to explore something there, on board. Just saying. At this point, Regal is talking to her and he says, I would ask if this monk is bothering you, but I guess if he was, he'd be on the ground looking for his teeth. And Marcus says to him, I'm sure Nona can have a disagreement without punching anyone in the face. And when Marcus says, go away, Regal starts to, then spins back, and Marcus says again, you would rather be watching the fights. And Regal turns away and walks off again. I hate watching this happen. I really do. This is one of those things that, like, regarding thread work and things like this, I know that there are people who can use them for good in general, but I just have such an issue with anything like this, like any sort of mind control abilities always give me the heebie fucking jeebies. Like, it's such a creepy thing to lose control of not only your body, but also maybe mentally what you want. Somebody convinces you that you want a thing that you don't. And it's not like until you are able to come up for air after they've like finished with you that you suddenly realize you didn't want that. That was nothing related to what you wanted. And it's too late. It's been done. It's handled. And I just find that so unnerving and so upsetting in a way. This is something that I was dealing with Mistborn as well, because I've been covering that for for patrons only. On Patreon. And there is a whole thing about soothing in that book where you make people feel more of a thing or less of a thing. And it's like the morals of being able to do that are discussed a lot more in that book than they are here, because I believe in this universe, it's just taken for granted that people are able to do this and that it's an ingrained gift. And there's a lot less judgment attached to it because it's sort of just accepted as like a fact of nature that there are just people born who can do it. And in Mistborn, while people are born who can do it and it happens, there's much more of a question in general about whether or not they should, even if they are born with it. Do they have the right? And I never really am convinced by the arguments characters make in that book about why it's okay if they do it. Do the ends seem to justify the means? Yeah, most of the time, honestly, they do. But in the meantime, I have just such a creeped out feeling at the idea of somebody being able to do this to me. And Marcus says, because when, Regal walks away, Nona's like, he's going to be super pissed later once that wears off. And Marcus says, he put up a real fight. I actually am surprised because I didn't think that he was going to be able to withstand what I did. And I think now I'm going to have a headache because that was pretty hard. And Nona's pleased because she actually, when Regal was made to abandon Darla during that fight at the palace, he really was fucked up over it, that somebody was able to manage to do that to him. So Nona has been training him on how to barricade himself against that sort of attack. And the fact that somebody was able to do it to him again after all of his practice is probably going to hurt his feelings a little bit, which honestly, it's a violation, and for somebody to violate you and you be so like traumatized by it, and then you put in a lot of work to keep it from happening again, and somebody's able to just do it again and kind of casually. This guy just doesn't want him here for this conversation. It's not even really necessary for Marcus to handle it this way. I don't blame Regal. Marcus, look, I don't want to be like super judgy because you are what you are, but also what the fuck, dude? So let's see. I'm trying to, I am 30 minutes into this and I've hardly gotten talking about any of these chapters. So she tells him that she needs his help to do something dangerous and illegal. And he's like, I don't understand why you even trust me. And she says, I trust you because you didn't ask me why I thought you would help, just why I would trust that help. And also because you didn't lie about what happened at the academy, which I think that's a good point. I liked that reasoning. And she says, I have to break into the Cathedral of St. Alum and steal something from High Priest Nevis's vault of forbidden books. Oh, okay. A heist. Guys, I can't tell you how very much on board with a heist I am. So then we go to chapter 2, and it's 3 years earlier. And we are with our crew who had just escaped the palace. Everybody is really like licking their wounds, literally. And they are trying to figure out where they're going to go. The abbess is talking about going to Verity. Lord Jotsis is like, we don't have to go all the way there. I have my estate over here, and it's like pretty formidable. And Abbess is like, look, Scherzel might not attack you in your castle, but she'll cut us off pretty effectively. We need to get to the capital, or else we're just not going to be able to fucking move. And the abbess says it's the ship heart that Scherzel wants above anything else. If we give her good reason to think it has gone in another direction, she won't spare many soldiers for chasing us, maybe none. So her plan is to have Zol take the ship heart north and let them see her do it so that she is the one that they chase. And Nona offers to go with her. And Ara also wants to, but Kettle is like, dude, you both are really badly injured, and you're just going to slow her down. I mean, it's going to be bad enough anyway. And what the abbess does is figure out how Zol can use the ship heart to heal them. And that way, they're going to be more prepared for the journey. However, that doesn't mean that Arabella is going to be able to go with them. Despite the fact that they get healed, Arabella is still separated, and it's just Nona and Zol that go off on their own. And I think that there's a really interesting part here. Oh my God, I forgot about this moment. I was listening to the audiobook for part of this section. And the audiobook narrator, for some reason, I don't know why they don't just go back and re-record when somebody makes a mistake like this. Nona took a few uncertain steps towards the girl, Ara behind her, then Kettle, all of them limping. The novice, because of the arrow, wound in her calf. The nun, because of a knife, wound in her thigh. It's obviously wound. What are you doing? That kind of mistake. Like, nobody caught that? The narrator themselves didn't realize while they were saying it, oh, that's not right. And like, stop? Come on. Anyway. So when Nona gets closer and closer to the ship heart, she feels the pressure of it and then starts hearing these voices. And it's like all voices that are hers, but they are coming at her with like different emotions. And I feel like that's super creepy, like hearing your own voice, something super familiar, but with like a emotional slant to it that's different with each one of them. It says some raging, some jealous, some whispering secret fears or wants, a babble at first, but each taking on a separate identity, becoming clearer, more distinct. And yeah, Nona stamped her leg. It still ached, but the flesh had been made whole, a white line of scar tissue marking the passage of Yisht's blade. And the voices kind of fall back, and, you know, the way it's written, it feels like they're still there, but she just can't hear them anymore, you know? So they head out separately, and Nona sort of watches, Ara leave with Regal and feels a bit of jealousy, over that. And then we jump back into the present with chapter 3. So Nona is sneaking back into the dorm after being out and fighting in the ring. And she's wondering about whether or not she should have trusted Marcus because she trusted Clara and Clara betrayed her. I'm still like holding on to this hope that Clara is not really working for Scherzel properly. I just really want her to be cool. And she comes to a halt it says, at the base of a great limestone cliff rose above her. From its heights, the southern windows of Blade Hall offered a view of the city, and 20 miles beyond, the ice glimmering red beneath the moon. The stars of the Saren Way lay close at hand, just a few minutes' walk around the rock, but Wheel had taken to watching it of late. The old woman spent whole nights seated at the narrowest part, wrapped in a great blanket and staring at the night with watery eyes, just waiting to catch any errant novice. Ruli claimed Wheel had been made to vow never to enter the building under the tenure of the previous abbess following an unspecified incident. Ruli claimed a novice had been killed, but when pressed, she had to admit making that part up. Yeah, I would love to know what that's about because Wheel's super judgy about Kettle and Apple. And I'm like, did she have like an inappropriate relationship with a student? And now she's like projecting her own guilt and shame on that onto Kettle and Apple's relationship. Like it's the same thing. I wonder about that a lot. Martin says, something I should mention, there was a short story between books 2 and 3 that has one very, very minor plot point that you likely wouldn't notice. Do you want to know what it is? Sure. Yeah. Tell me. Lay it on me. Oh, and I should mention too, I know I said this probably at the beginning of the last book. Just, Mark Lawrence, thank you so much for the fucking story so far at the beginning of the book. I just find that super helpful. Like it just, I don't know why more authors don't do that. It's all like he specifically says, I'm doing this to avoid awkward, stilted conversation between characters where they tell each other shit that they already know, or it's done in a way that it's telling the reader things that I already know. And it's always just such a strange thing to read when that happens and you know it's happening. And I don't like it. And just doing the story so far, it's like, not only is it just helpful to refresh things, but it connects dots for me sometimes that I had failed to put together myself. And sometimes that's like, not because I'm not paying attention. It's just, I didn't realize certain things went together. And it's just sort of organizing my brain for when I jump back into this part of the story. Martin says Ara and Nona made out in the moonlight and formed a thread bond. I got what I wanted, but I didn't get to see it. They made out. That makes me really happy. No wonder she's a little jealous. That makes sense. And now they have a thread bond. Interesting. Okay. Thank you, Martin. Oh, baby gays. Well, I guess Nona's not gay. I wonder if Ara's gay or if she's bi. But anyway, oh yay. Thank you, Martin. I'm excited to know that. So she has to climb in this way because fucking Wheel is watching this thing. And as she does so, she gets stopped by Kettle, who is in the shadows. And Kettle is just like, you smell like a fucking dude. And Nona's like, yeah, well, you smell like an apple. It's super weird. And I thought that was a pretty good comeback. And Kettle tells her to watch out for Joelle. And as she heads inside, she finds several thread traps that have been laid for her. She doesn't know for sure what any of them does. I should just mention that. They're very, like, a lot of them are very different from each other, and she can tell that by, like, the color. But what they do specifically, she doesn't know. And there's this weirdness about how Joelle is, like, being really nice to her. And when the fact that Joelle is back at school blew me away. When Kettle says, watch out for Joelle, I was just like, what? How is she allowed? And it turns out how she was allowed, at least this is Nona's theory, and it makes sense to me. She was like given one of those truth pills and yet continued to say that she was only trying to stop the fighting. She wasn't trying to like instigate things against certain people. And Nona's theory is that Joelle's well-connected father got somebody from the academy to go into Joelle's brain and change up her memories so that when Joelle is asked a question, she will be answering from her perspective, honestly, because as far as she remembers, that's how it happened. But it isn't the reality of what was going on at the time. And Joelle is suddenly being really nice to Nona. And Nona's just like, well, obviously, like, I could say, oh, maybe they've changed her memories regarding her feelings towards me. But this bitch is laying all these traps for me. So clearly, that's not real. That's not a change that's like deep in her memories. She's just faking being nice to me. And I find that so unnerving. Like a person who hates you and that you know hates you and that you know is privately trying to hurt you, being super nice to your face is just the grossest thing. And I really wonder, like, I have to assume that that is because Joelle is realizing that people don't trust her and that she's trying to lay it on as thick as possible, that she's like a changed, better person than they all thought whenever she's in view of someone. Because otherwise, what I would have to think is somebody did change her thoughts regarding Nona, but she isn't the one laying the thread traps. And I don't think that's true. Although Nona does note that the thread traps, trip threads, trip threads, they're both correct. That they are excellent work. She calls them basically like works of art. And Joelle does seem super talented, so I don't feel like it's like out of the question that she did that. But I mean, it might be possible that they were laid by somebody else. I don't know. It doesn't seem likely. I'm just saying. So Nona manages to like evade them and pull them apart, although one of them does kind of like burn her as she takes it apart and goes inside. It says, still watching Joelle in the dim glow of the night lantern. Nona released the breath she had been holding and surrendered to exhaustion. The next day would be a long one. Not only would she undergo her final blade test, she needed to seal the convent's seal of office from the abbess. And I was like, what are you doing? I also was surprised that she would like be taking her blade test the day after going down to town to fight in the ring. I was like, why wouldn't you just put that off till another day? Denham, I'm sure, fights fairly frequently. You have a very important test tomorrow. So then we go to chapter 4. And this is when they all actually split up. They hadn't quite at the end of chapter 2. And she and Zoll are really like hauling ass as much as they can up this mountain. And neither of them has particular experience with navigating a mountain. Nona is somebody who's in pretty goddamn good shape. And she is out of breath and like ready to fucking die. Zoll, living on the ice is flat. This isn't terrain that she's familiar with. And when they look back, they can see that the fucking soldiers are catching up to them. They are not as far ahead as they want to be. And a lot of that is because Nona is under the misapprehension that they are simply trying to get away. But that is not Zoll's intention. And she tells Nona, no, I'm trying to find a good spot where I can kill them all. And Nona's like, wait, what? And Zoll's like, yeah, I mean, they are the idiots who followed a girl up a mountain when they have already seen her create a landslide. So I'm not really sure what they're thinking, but I am definitely going to do that shit again. So sucks to suck. And I mean, she has a point. I guess they thought that was like a one trick thing that she maybe couldn't do again so soon after having done it once already. And it does tire her out. She even says later, because Nona's like, well, why just do it again? And she's like, it's kind of exhausting. But she is able to pull one more out. And it is interesting how like reluctant Nona is to kill them when she has no problem with killing in other circumstances. It's the fact that this is like a much more cold, calculated kill. She has a hard time with something that's strategic like this versus the bloodlust of the moment, trying to go up against somebody. That is a totally different thing. In those circumstances, she has to hold herself back from killing somebody. But here, it is a completely different situation, and she's really uncomfortable with it. So at this point, Nona, like they hunker down and sort of wait because they want everybody to gather at the foot of the mountain more completely. And Nona's looking out over the edge, and it's just like, it looks like everybody's here. And Zol says, we have to wait for the leaders and the Noi Gwyn. Once they start climbing, that will be the Noi Gwyn, to see the officers watch where the troops face. So they watch them climbing. And as they begin climbing, Zol says, we are never more vulnerable than when giving chase. And Nona's a little bit derisive, and it's just like, oh, is that some ice tribe saying? And Zol says, Abbess Glass said it. And I loved that. It doesn't, like, you don't really get Nona's reaction to that, but I imagine that shut her right up a little bit. Because I feel Nona has a lot of respect for Abbess Glass. So she takes the ship heart and she smashes it into the face of the mountain. The impact was a strange one. No fragments of stone flew off. There was no great crash, just a deep pulse that seemed to spread out through the mountain. Nona felt it through her back where it pressed the stone. All three climbers froze. A moment passed. Another. Then a lurch that sent Nona flying towards the drop. It seemed the whole mountain twitched. Only Hunska reflexes combined with stone-piercing flaw blades saved her from falling. Everything below the two novices, except for the top dozen feet of the cliff, broke away and began to fall, a descending curtain of rock, fracturing as it slid over the deeper parts of the mountain that remained fixed. The scene below them vanished beneath a rising cloud of dust. And Zol says, follow me, and starts to walk along the ledge. And Nona's like, well, shouldn't we just keep climbing straight up? Because then we'll be far enough away to lose them. And Zol says we do not want them to lose us, just that they do not catch us. And Zol is just such a fucking, like, focused... She knows what's up. So they get up to a point where they're able to take a rest, and Zol has food and water, which is shocking to Nona that she's like prepared. And Nona asks why Zol came for her. And Zol says, because you're the shield and I need your protection, which, considering that she's been the savior here, Nona almost thinks is Zol fucking with her, which I am not surprised. I kind of would too, but there's not a lot of humor to Zol. Not none. She has some occasionally, but not a lot. And then it's time to climb again. And Zol says they will try to get ahead of us. The Noi Gwyn will try to come at us from several different directions at once. It will be better if we do not find out whether I can do that again or not. And Nona realizes as she's looking at Zol that Zol looks tired and that she has never seen Zol look tired. And that enough is sort of motivating to her to get going. So then, Chapter 5, present day, Holy Class. Nona gets up. It's the day of her test. Everybody knows it's the day of her test. And everybody is wishing her luck. And she is kind of regretting telling anybody that the date of her class was set, because she wishes that they would all just kind of like not talk about it. And I have to say that I probably would feel as she does. There is something about everybody being aware of you striving for a thing that makes it a little bit harder sometimes. It's an interesting, I was reading about this phenomenon because there's a lot of people who think that by having external accountability, that will make them more likely to continue working towards a goal. And that means that they will be more likely to actually reach their goal if they're public about the goal itself and what they're attempting to do. And that studies are actually showing that people are more likely to reach goals that they don't share with anybody. Because that when people are public about a goal and then they inevitably like fuck up on their journey, they will feel a lot of shame because of the fact that folks are watching. And that shame will often lead to them falling completely off track and not picking up where they left off, versus somebody who is doing something privately. If they fuck up, they just kind of pick up and keep going after that fuck up. And I found that really interesting, and it rang true to me. It was something that I was like, yeah, you know what? I could see that. Like, once I screw up on something, I have always been an all or nothing person that struggles to pick back up where I left off. And I would much rather just pretend that I never made the goal at all. Not really anymore. I've kind of started to grow out of that finally, but that was true of me for a long time. And not that Nona has that sort of attitude, but I think that the reminder that people are aware it's going on, it's just a constant, like, sort of spike in her anxiety, you know? And let's see. I love this part where Jula says, I thought I might try something different today. Ketty and Nona exchanged a quick, no you won't glance. There are people like that. Joelle seated herself at the far end of the table. Blade final. Why, Nona, you're quite pink with excitement. Pray, ancestor, it will be a good one. She smiled brightly. They all ignored her. Oof. Pink. That is the thing that Nona says later in order to, like, trip up Ara as they are fighting. And I found that really funny, the whole way that, like, she just says something kind of offbeat to make Ara stop and go, what? It's like a kind of a dirty trick, but also hilarious. And it's not even meant to be a trick so much as Nona is like reminding herself of something that enrages her to motivate her. The fact that Joelle is able to get under her skin like that. No matter how tightly she held herself against threadwork, Joelle could still pull her strings in the way that required no magic. Just dropping the word pink into the conversation around the breakfast table earlier had nearly made Nona bite Genna's head off for daring to wish her good luck. Now, is there something about the word pink that I'm supposed to remember that is particularly triggering to Nona? If you want to tell me, Martin, that's fine. If you don't think I should know yet, that's also fine. But Joelle, like, there is something about, we all have a Joelle, right? Somebody that we wish so much that they couldn't get the rise out of us that they do. And we try to fight it, and we want to just not let it be. We just don't want to be a slave to our reactions like that. But there are just people out there that manage to fucking get to you, man. And it just always, it's just, there's two different versions of this. There are the people who are genuinely like kind of trolls, like Joelle, who are trying to get to you and you wish they didn't, and they do. And then there's the people that they're not trying to get to you, but something else has made them forever, like, everything they do sets you off. We call it the bitch eating crackers phenomenon, where basically something has gone on with this person and you, and now it has turned every one of their most innocent actions into this like personal assault in your mind. And so it turns into like you sitting there fuming, watching them as they just eat some crackers. And you just look at that bitch eating crackers over there when they're not fucking doing anything, but you just hate them because of nothing. And, yeah, I always hate that feeling because it does feel out of your control. And I understand Nona getting really like feeling personal about this, you know. Martin says, not yet. I'm not sure if it's mentioned now or next chapters. Ooh, okay, cool. So Nona fights against Ara, and Ara says something to her about, did anyone ever tell you that you look scary as hell when you fight for real? And Nona says no and helps her up. And Ara says, I hope you don't make scary faces like that in other kinds of battles. And Nona's like, what do you mean? And she says, the late night sort you might get into with Regal. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Nona wondered if she saw something hidden, something hurt. The look vanished as quickly as it showed, replaced with Ara's impression of Nona's expression. Okay. Well then. So then we go to the actual test, and there is this new nun here that Nona has never met, and she is called Sister Iron. And Sister Iron is going to be taking over as Mistress Blade. And Nona feels a bit of a way about this. She doesn't want to say goodbye to Sister Tallow, who's like, I'm a Hunska and we age really quickly. I am getting old and I can't do this anymore. So I am going to be able to join the Holy Sisters and it'll be great. And I understand, like, whether or not you have affection for somebody, there's just also change can be hard, you know? So Tallow says you will fight Sister Iron for the red. Control, restraint, respect. And Nona begins to fight, and Sister Iron kind of does this thing where she stands perfectly still and doesn't react, and looks at Nona in this way that seems to really suggest that Nona isn't up to her standards personally, and she's not impressed. And when Nona comes at her, she doesn't move, and Nona like looks over at Sister Tallow, kind of like, what the fuck am I supposed to do here? And as soon as she looks away, Iron smacks her in the face with the sword, the side of her sword, which, the nun released her own sword and slapped Nona hard across the face, hard enough to rattle her teeth. Yeah, it is with the sword, I'm pretty sure. Nona leapt away, and by the time she was clear, Sister Iron had kicked her falling sword back into the air and snatched hold of it once again. And Nona, she's mad for sure, but she's mad at herself and is just like, when am I going to learn? There's no rules to this. They can do whatever they want. I just have to fucking win. And finally, I love this. Nona kicked her falling blade back into the air and caught it as Iron had, but with far less grace. The pair of them ended 2 yards apart, gazes locked, one on the other. So she comes at her and is like, you know what? I know that I'm supposed to fight with this certain style and this certain mastery, but also I am like really good at fighting when I'm angry and just going for it. So she decides to let loose a little bit. And as she does, she pushes Sister Iron back, and she does wind up losing in the end, but she gains some ground. And Sister Iron, regardless of the fact that, you know, this girl got ahead of her a little bit, she says, would the ancestor be properly represented by such a warrior? Where was your serenity? You fight like a wild animal. I cannot recommend you be given an ancient blade. Would it even be proper for you to wear the red? And I wonder if she is a plant of some kind, because I don't, you know, it's not even like she's somebody else from the convent that Nona's seen. She's new. And I'm very curious about who this woman is. And Wheel tries to be like, well, I guess she's not going to get her blade then, because Wheel's a shriveled up old cunt who just hates Nona and hates fun and just is, I hate her so much. And Sister Tallow is like, hi, no, I'm still Mistress Blade, and I say that she has passed. And I was like, honestly thinking that she might not at that point. I kind of was like worried about it. And she winds up, it says, the bows given to and reciprocated by the Sister Superior, the required formal embrace with the abbess, the long march from the hall. Before she knew it, Nona found herself hurrying from the building. So yeah, this we find out is when she has stolen the seal from the abbess, is during that, like, that specific embrace. And I can't help but wonder if the abbess knows what Nona's up to, because she just seems to know shit, you know? And I can't imagine that something of that importance would be taken from her and she wouldn't see that it's missing. But I don't really know how that sort of thing works. So she meets up with her friends and tells them all that she passed. And her friends are figuring out what they're going to be doing here. Let's see. We're not going to call you Nona Pink then, Jula grinned. Right? I don't think, like, I still don't think it's been explained. They are just mentioning it because of, oh my God, what's her face? Joelle. So Nona says, we're not here to talk about my blade test. We're here to talk about Jula's book. It's not her book. If so, we wouldn't have to steal it. And Ketty says, we've been talking through it again. We need two things to pull it off, and we're going to have to steal both of them. We need the Book of Lost Cities from Sister Pan's secret stash. That's got to be in the third room. 2, we need the Abbess's seal of office. Without her seal on our message, they'll never let us in. And Nona says we also need the eye drops the poisoner was working on. And sorry, Martin's commenting. It has, I think, it's a red sister who doesn't get a proper blade. Oh, was it? So red sister light. Oh, I must have missed that. My bad. I don't know how I missed that. Okay. So she's like, when she's like, you look positively pink with excitement, she's basically being like, you're not gonna get it. So I wonder if that woman was a plant iron. I don't like her. Not that she's not an amazing fighter, because she clearly is. Like, Nona's very impressed with her. But anyway, so these eye drops, apparently make her eyes look normal again, but they could potentially make her go blind. The thing is that she needs to go in unrecognized, and her eyes are so distinctive that there's no other way to do it. And Nona tries, when Ketty's like, they make you look good, Nona tries to act like that doesn't matter, but she does realize that when she had been hanging out with Regal, he seemed to enjoy gazing into her normal eyes in a way that he didn't with her other eyes, her regular eyes. And she says, I found us an empath at the fight rings last night, the strongest I've ever met. And I have this. And she pulls out the Abbess's seal. So we still don't know exactly what it is why they're trying to steal this book, but we're on our way with this heist, so I'm interested. All right, it's time for me to wrap up, but thank you again very much, Martin, for commissioning this episode. I hope you guys are enjoying the coverage, and yeah, I have no idea what to expect for the rest of this book, so I am really looking forward to it. Until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.